Dragon Dreams, Book 3, Losing Ground, written by Gina Virginia Casella. Story, Lizard Lady. I kept having dreams and meditations in which I wore a pearl necklace. The pearls were quite large. In my dreams, I was a lizard-like woman living in a forest. I could not gather any more information until one day I began discussing perspective with my spiritual counselor, Eric, Council of Nine. We talked extensively about the dreams I was having, which involved me as this lizard lady and a theme of me changing perspective in some way. In this form, I would sit on a rock looking at the pearls, pondering if I did the right thing. What thing, I wondered? It began with holding one large pearl in my webbed hand. Then there were several. Each time I dreamed, I had more and more of these large pearls. As I described things to Eric, Council of Nine, it suddenly dawned on me that the pearl necklace was an eyeball necklace. In this form, at one point, I started collecting eyeballs. I had a frog-like tongue and could easily lick out an eyeball with complete ease. It was a grotesque and disgusting realization. How could I be so violent? Why did I do this? It was powerful because the perspective in the community needed to shift, hence the taking of an eyeball. You see, during the time of the lizard lady, people were quite barbaric, so this act was not as extreme for me then. Long before modern humans evolved, the lizard lady lived for an extremely long time. She was able to observe the conscious evolution of earlier hominoids into Homo sapiens sapiens over many generations during her time on Earth. For before the moon's arrival to long after it shifted many things on the planet. So there I was, the lizard lady, minding my own business in the forest long ago. I was the only one of my kind, extraordinarily intelligent, with a significantly longer lifespan than the humans. I was not sure where I came from, and I lived alone among the animals. As the human population grew, children would explore the forest and I would remain hidden, observing them. Often, I rescued them from drowning or from wild animals. Though I saved them, they feared me as I was extraordinarily and undeniably unfamiliar to them. Children grew into adults, and these adults would later visit me to thank me for rescuing them in their childhood. They came to the water to visit me because they thought I lived in the water, since that is where I often rescued them. I lived in the forest, sleeping here and there. I could travel through the water and trees easily. For generations, I have tried to help the vulnerable, although my efforts were continuously misunderstood. When I rescued anyone from drowning, from wild animals, or from each other, they were scolded for spreading lies or warned that I had sinister intentions. Rumors spread that I used dark powers to lure people into danger so I could devour them. If they managed to escape me, they remembered a false story of me rescuing them because the rumor dictated I brainwashed them. Despite my good intentions, I was feared, mistrusted, and misunderstood in the community for generations. As time went on, more humans came, and I disliked their search for me, the monster. As a result, I moved deeper into the forest and did not see anyone for an exceptionally long time. One day, the forest sensed that 3 men were approaching with the body of a young woman. After dumping her in the water, the men fished and discussed camping for a few nights before returning home. Intuitively, I knew they had killed her and brought her body here to hide their crime. They planned to blame me, the monster. Although the woman was deceased, I could feel her spirit urging me to expose the truth, as these men had killed her and had committed such acts before. Revealing myself at the water's edge, the delighted men called to me. They wanted me to come closer and referred to me as a mermaid, which I was not. They were perverted, and they were distracted by my appearance, especially my exposed breasts. Realizing they were unremorseful killers, I tipped their canoe, drowning them, to stop them from harming others. I returned the woman's body to her community so they could properly honor her, but my efforts seemed to cause much fear and discomfort among the community members. I was blamed for her death and for the missing men who were never found. It troubled me how much the missing men were mourned. Many people believed I wanted them to stay out of the forest or they would face death, like the 3 men and this woman. One day, some men abducted a woman, taking her deep into the forest. She was still alive. After already having abused her, they mocked her, joking about throwing her off a cliff so they would not get blood-stained. They also laughed because in the past, they would kill the woman and then have to carry the heavy bodies. But in this case, she could walk. And then it was an easy push off the cliff. Maybe they would even make her jump off, perhaps tie her up and toss her into the water. I gave the men a chance to abandon their malicious intent, but when they moved in to attack the woman, I intervened to protect her. Realizing that violence would not solve the deeper issue of disrespect towards women, I chose at that moment to take an eye off each man instead of killing them. The men returned to their community and spread exaggerated rumors that painted me as the villain and them as heroes. The woman told the truth and was called a liar by almost everyone. I was concerned the woman would be threatened by the men to keep quiet about what really happened. However, the community was so shaken up by the incident that there was no need for threats of silence. While some thought it best to avoid speaking of me altogether, fearing it might draw my attention to them, many never entered the forest again, afraid of encountering me. Unfortunately, some men continued to enter the forest and commit crimes against women. Curious children often wandered in, and as usual, I would rescue them from drowning or from wild animals. Men who returned home missing an eye became my trademark. There was uncertainty if they were heroes or villains. If I was a hero or villain. Some of the curious children witnessed the truth, and once home, they reported out. They were called liars. The women were accused of persuading the children to lie. There was much confusion, fear, and pointing of fingers. Investigations came into effect. The trademark of having one eye was no longer a heroic symbol. The one-eyed man eventually began a routine of committing suicide rather than returning home facing shame, as the truth was beginning to shine through. When they did not return due to their suicide, community members searched for their bodies, led by the very women who had been victimized and or by the children who bore witness. This leadership in the search parties lent credibility to their accounts. Over generations, I ended up amassing quite a collection of eyeballs. Unsure of what to do with them, I strung them together on a necklace as grisly trophies. Perspectives differed on whether I was good or evil, including my own perspective of myself. Many were simply afraid of the unknown, yet some believed I was benevolent, recalling old stories of me rescuing their ancestors. Things like guns were being invented. Though wary of harm or capture, I occasionally revealed myself to those who came to the water, believing I was good. Women in particular thanked me for helping their grandmothers long ago. Often, I was asked to keep protecting the people, including the men. Over time, the routine of men abducting women into the forest ceased. In the past, I mistakenly harmed others by taking their lives or by removing their eyeball, thinking my actions were justified. This misguided behavior led me to face hardships that I believed were punishment. Although I no longer engage in those harmful acts, today I help people gain new understanding and clarity through hypnotherapy. I have moved beyond my previous confusion about the morality of my actions and now focus on providing therapeutic care to others. I learned in most of my past lives, I was incarnated as a masculine. I had been cruel and abusive to women. Determined to never mistreat women again, I became the lizard lady. Removing eyeballs conveyed an extreme shift in perspective, fitting that historical era. It was a disgusting form of communication, yet that is where communication was at. The lizard lady regretted not taking more peaceful actions and being unable to communicate her advanced intelligence. There was a significant disconnect in comprehension and perspective between the species. However, love is a universal concept that all beings have understood since the beginning of time. Later, in a meditation, I returned the eyes to the men, symbolically healing this ancestral trauma. Initially, I had mixed feelings about undergoing this regression. It proved to be a powerful lesson that when we regress, shadows surface from within. This lizard lady was suffering because she felt conflicted about her actions. Within her shadow, there were additional shadows, the masculines I used to be, also suffering from actions against the feminine. The lizard lady lived an extraordinarily long life. She eventually changed forms like a shapeshifter to blend into the community, appearing as an old woman. The old woman lived alone by day and became a secret vigilante by night. She moved between communities where her herbalism and spirit work were seen as threatening magic. Before returning to the forest where she died, she taught others about healing and spirit work. She is one of my higher selves. This regression allowed her healing, so she can now lend me perspective. Associated with air, water, and eagle condor, she is a healed healer at peace now, as are those masculine shadows. The lizard lady tells me she died resting peacefully in the sun on the shoreline. Once she died, the waves rolled in, absorbing her body back into the collective. Her wisdom endures within me. One day, in this life, I moved back to British Columbia after a crisis in my life in Ontario. One of the first places I went was to the ocean. I felt emotional walking toward the shoreline. As the waves greeted my feet, the water whispered, "Welcome home, Gina." I now know that this was the whisper of the lizard lady. It is the only voice I hear on occasion inside my head. Otherwise, any and all communications from her or others are through thought forms, feelings, or through vivid dreams, half remembered, half misunderstood. Little did I know, her voice carried the essence of the divine feminine. It took me several years to realize that it was my own voice all along. This realization initially unsettled me, as if there were fragments of myself beyond my conscious mind reaching out to me. The whispers of her voice resonated deeply, echoing the word home and even welcome home. It wasn't just returning home, but being embraced by the divine feminine.